And this is the 5th episode of Context here. I am one of the hosts, I guess, of this show here that mixes current events and history. My name is Matt Beat, aka Mr. Beat from Mr. Beat Social Studies channel on YouTube. Robert?
This is Robert from Reading Through History. Check out us on YouTube. Just type in Reading Through History. Starting to grow there, big.
Yeah. You guys are, we up to like 600 some subscribers now?
It was February, we had 70. We're up to 609 last time I checked.
Nice. Yeah. Well, you guys are posting like crazy. I can't keep up. So I guess it helps when there's 2 of you, but still.
Yeah, I mean, we try.
All right. Well, when we started this show, about a month and a half ago, we agreed on 3, I guess, themes for this show. One was new discoveries in history, which we have quite a bit of in this episode. Also, we had basically revisionist history, which we're going to have a little episode.
Yes.
And then the final thing is how history repeats itself, which I think we have a little bit of that too. So this is
we have it covered on this episode. There's no doubt.
Yeah, so I think this is gonna be a good one. I'm really excited. First of all, this has been in the news quite a bit, so I know Robert didn't want to squeeze this one in, but I felt it might be out of the news cycle next time. So there has been a bit of a naming dispute regarding the tallest mountain in North America, which is formerly known as Mount McKinley, but now officially President Obama wants to change it to Denali. And it's been kind of hilarious, honestly, to watch all the drama go down. So first of all, it was a couple weeks ago, the president announced that he would like to change Mount McKinley back to Denali, because that's what it was called before that. For centuries, okay, for like thousands of years, the natives called it that, which Denali means the Great One. I'm not sure in what language that is, but that's the translation. And they changed it. It was first called Mount McKinley. We just looked it up in 1896 by a man named William Dickey, who was a leading gold prospectors there. And then officially in 1917, Congress renamed it to Mount McKinley officially. And then, of course, that was President Wilson who signed that. And then, so ever since then, it's been Mount McKinley. However, if you go to Alaska, nobody calls it Mount McKinley. They all call it Denali. And my brother and I don't know if you knew this, but we drove to Alaska 5 years ago.
I've seen some pictures, and you're revisiting on Facebook.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. We drove from Kansas City all the way there and back, and then in 17 days.
So you actually heard the locals call it Denali.
Yes. Oh, by the way, we have a video on my channel that documents the whole thing. But
interesting. That would be nice to see.
The video was a lot better when it had music, but YouTube took down most of the soundtrack, so that was annoying.
The music, fascist, Nazis on YouTube.
Yeah. But anyway, when we were there, we were lucky enough to see it because in July, it's hard to see because they're covering it up. But nobody there called it McKinley. Everybody called it Denali. It's Denali National Park. I mean, that's always been the name. And so, I thought that was interesting. But anyway, this latest controversy, the people who are the most upset are the people that don't live in Alaska. There's a lot of people in Ohio that are upset because, understandably, William McKinley is from Ohio, and he was, considered a pretty good president, especially, you're always biased about the presidents that are from your home state. I know there's no presidents from Oklahoma, is there?
Not even really close. Carl Albert made it to the Speaker of the House, and there's all kinds of stuff named after him. Which I was going to say, I mean, it would be hilarious if they took like the highest or the lowest point in Ohio and changed the name to Mount McKinley. Like even if it's, even if it was the fun, lowest part, it would be funnier, like if it was a canyon or something. We're just going to call
There
it
you
Mount
go.
McKinley. Yeah, I mean, I didn't read a news story about it till you posted that one. I saw a lot of memes and stuff about it, and it does seem kind of ridiculous, with all the stuff going on in the world. Because one of the memes was, "Oh, ISIS is beheading people, and the world economy is getting ready to crash, and the illegal immigration problems going on all over the Western world." And Barack Obama takes a break from golf to rename Mount McKinley. So I
Well,
kind of just ignored. I mean, I know in my geography books and stuff, I mean, when I teach, I teach sixth grade geography, and we're going to have to go through the geography. I even have lessons I would have to rewrite because, I've got in there the tallest point in the United States of America is Mount McKinley. It's like all the textbooks and stuff
yeah.
say Mount McKinley.
Well, I I personally do not see any problem with calling it officially Denali. I think the uproar is a little ridiculous. Kind of back to what I was saying. Here in Kansas, we've had one president come from this state, Dwight D. Eisenhower, and we're always biased to think he's one of the better presidents as well. But McKinley, in my opinion, was an okay president. What really makes me a little hesitant to say he was a great president was the fact that he was somebody who used his Christianity to justify imperialism, basically over Cuba when we promised not to, and the atrocities that were committed in the Philippines because
the Philippines it was way worse there.
Yeah.
I mean, very, very dark and unknown chapter of U.S. history.
Yes, very unknown. In fact, you don't see hardly anything about it in history books about, the American-Philippine conflict, war, whatever. They don't even have a name for it officially. It's like, oh yeah, we'll just forget that ever happened.
Yeah, 200,000 Filipinos died. Yeah, I do have a video on that though. Ironically,
you do.
Yeah.
I was thinking about making a story time for that, but then I thought
it would be a good one. I mean, there's a lot of meat on that bone. There's a lot of meat.
Well, but anyway, I know the economy was booming when he was president. It was a good time. A lot of people, he liked him. He was popular. But Ohio,
a lot of people died as a result of decisions he made. And interestingly enough, if all that doesn't go down, Teddy Roosevelt's probably never president. Teddy Roosevelt's never president. No name recognition. Is FDR ever president? You just never really know.
The what if game. I love it. Alternate history.
You go down a big hole when you go down that one.
Those channels always do a lot better than ours, the alternative history channels that you see.
It's because of the arguments it causes underneath. I mean, every single thing you talk about. I mean, it's like my two most commented on videos, what the rebel yell sounded like. Then one that gets a lot of arguments. I don't know if it has more comments than others, but did the South have the right to secede? It's just like it does well because people get on there and argue.
Yeah, that's exactly what you call it. I would not call it debate. It's just people yelling at each other.
Yeah, we're in this position. We as teachers, educators running educational channels can't really take, controversial stands on anything, just that type of content.
Right.
Even though it's fun, but it gets you nowhere at all. When I first heard this, I went and read the article you'd posted. I thought, well, is it a bunch of conservatives angry and thinking, oh, our first black president just took away something named after a white man and turned it into, back to a native, I'm assuming some Inuit word, and then it would be named after like some Inuit god or something. I figured that's what a lot of it was about. But Mount McKinley sounds cool, but and again, so does Denali. Is that what it's called, Denali? It almost sounds like a Czech-made car or something. Try the new Denali.
No, it is a car.
That's
GM
what
made
I
a.
thought.
Yeah, it's named after the largest mountain in North America, which its true name, Denali.
Okay, because
Back
something
to
in the back of my mind was like, that's a car, but it, like I said,
yeah,
it sounds Czech or something.
yeah, it's named after the mountain. But
I knew I wasn't going crazy. Okay. Might be a little tired, but
okay.
not crazy.
Well, just to kind of wrap this up here, I want to go back to Ohio because if you live in Ohio, you're proud of McKinley. I can understand why you'd be upset. That is a little understandable.
There's a McKinley
Uh,
Elementary in Oklahoma. Elementary
really,
school. Yeah, I
that's
think it's in Enid.
that's a bit unusual. Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean he's a fairly popular president across the country, but just 4 days after the Obama administration announced the decision to rename the mountain, members of the Ohio congressional delegation wrote a letter declaring McKinley's quote legacy has been tarnished by a political stunt to promote a partisan agenda unquote. This is where I'm starting to get a little upset by this, not upset, but just annoyed.
Yeah, partisan.
Because that, yeah, it's too
Was a
political.
Republican, and Barack Obama is a Democrat.
Yeah, which did not. I mean, obviously, the Republican Party back then and Democratic Party back then were nothing like they are today.
Right.
This is what. That's just the beginning. Then we have our boy Donald Trump, basically, assuming that he's going to become president. He tweeted, you know how he is when he tweets. That
He's
he
very
would
good at
change.
that.
He would change the traditional name of Denali back to Mount McKinley after he was president. He's like, I will change it back. Great insult to Ohio. I will change it back.
Which is a state. No Republican has won the presidential election without winning Ohio, and I think it's a. I don't know. I don't want to embarrass myself, but I'm wanting to say it's like 80 or 100 years, somewhere around in there.
Well, I know Missouri is one of those states too that they finally got it wrong with Obama. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I think Ohio it tends to be those swing states. I think that
I'm wanting to say it's 100 years or so. I know it's a long time.
Ohio is the swing state, right? It seems like they're always courting the presidential candidates.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I didn't think about that. So maybe that's why he jumped in on that.
There's so much thought that goes into that stuff. I mean, it is insane.
Yeah, it's a little sick, really. But anyway, that's all I'm going to say about McKinley. All I know is this is oh, I forgot to mention the meme, the hilarious meme that was going around. This was I actually first saw it on Snopes.com. Snopes is great because they're actually a truth-seeking site that at least they're trying really hard to get the truth. But apparently there's this meme going around, and I'll have the link in when we air this. But the meme has Denali, and then the text says, President Barack Obama is renaming Mount McKinley to, quote, Denali. Denali is the Kenyan word for black power, spread awareness. That really happened. Like, you wonder if it was satire or whatever. First of all, there's no Kenyan word for anything because Kenya has 2 official languages, English and Swahili. And Denali, of course, like I said earlier, means the Great One. So this type of stuff that has just politicized the naming of a mountain, again, reveals ignorance of American history.
And American people in general. I mean, how could, and just the thought of Kenyans in Alaska. I mean, it's like
black power. That's
because you would have to just think Barack Obama just pulled that name out of somewhere for that to make any sense at all. Any sense at all.
Yeah. Well, I hope that was just satire, but you never know.
Well, if it makes it to Snopes, it's a legitimate push, movement. People are literally asking the question, so it's a little discouraging.
Definitely. All right, I think we should go back into what more legitimate people like archaeologists, what they're finding, stuff like that.
Yeah, and I just actually just got done with the French and Indian War in my 8th grade U.S. history class. And
Nice.
right before I went into it, and I love the French and Indian War. It is so fascinating and it's so overlooked. But upstate New York, which was a big battleground, Fort Ticonderoga, the Saratoga campaign, all of that stuff. An archaeological dig near Lake George, New York, they uncovered what was the beginning of a major British fortification that they were building around 250 years ago. And it's inside a battlefield park. And they took a group, volunteers, and they went out there for about 6 weeks over the summer. And they started this big, massive dig. And they found this site where thousands of British soldiers were building this fort. And one of the interesting things about it is, this ground changed hands like 2 or 3 times throughout the course of the war. And it's a busy tourist part of the state, but like very few people go there. And it kind of brought up the point to me, like there are museums that are about 30 minutes away from me that I never visit. I've never been inside. Yet I have this longing to go see like Valley Forge and Gettysburg and New York City and Boston and Philadelphia, places far away. And some people just don't really traffic this region very much. But they were digging down and they found these intact stone walls, like underground, that they were building this fort, and then the war ends, they never finish it, and it was even occupied by U.S. troops during the Revolutionary War, but they didn't know it was there because it was like covered up and stuff. So very, very fascinating. And they found, the casemate underneath it, which is where they put all the gunpowder and such, so it wouldn't blow up during a bombardment. So there is a lot of history here with the frontier wars, the French and Indian War, the American Revolution. And the guy, his name is David Orr, who was commenting on this, said he's been digging in this area, researching for like 25 years. He is the expert on this site, and he had no idea it was there after 25 years. And he said, we're talking, this thing was 6 feet high, 5 feet thick. He's like, I had no idea. And he was more excited about it than anything he had discovered in 25 years. And he said this was built, rebuilt, improved over a 20-year period. And I'm like, how much stuff like this is there that we just have no idea, even the experts?
Yeah. It's what surprised me the most about this was what you just said, that it was forgotten about and it was almost in plain sight. Like, well, it was covered up, but it was so close, and it's like nobody stumbled upon it in the last 200 years. Like no one, or 250 years. And it gets you thinking about, really lived in that area in the years after the Revolution, really throughout the early decades of our country's history. They probably didn't quite think that it was significant as it was. Because if you think about it, if you live during a time, you don't know what's going to be significant to future people so much. Like, because sometimes you historical event and you don't realize it. I think of things that I see on the news. I'm like, is this something that's going to really stick in 50 or 100 or 200 years? And so maybe that's why the locals that lived around this, that perhaps knew that something was there, but didn't think anything of it, or didn't think that was that big a deal. It kind of blows my mind. I lived around it. I know it's a fairly isolated area, right? But still a lot of tourists come out there.
Yeah, it's just a sad thing. They ignore the fort that is there, and they go do all this other stuff. Because they just see it as a field and trees and I assume the lake gets a lot of visitors, but he said it was something that was unexpected for even him. And
Yeah.
I kind of get excited about these stories, and it kind of makes me wonder how much else is there, because he used the words covered up and completely forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of sad, but it also made me think of all of our military bases around the world, because I know a few years ago there was a big story, this huge massive facility we built in Afghanistan. It was this building that cost like several $1 billion, the whole grounds, and then we abandon it, we leave, and it's just sitting there rotting in the desert.
Jeez.
All the money, and stuff like this cost a lot of money, their time, to and they never even finish it.
Yeah, there's a lot that we don't know about. I think the waste military, the money that's been wasted with military spending in that region. I mean, and yeah, maybe this could end up being something like that too, where it was forgotten because I don't know, they just didn't see. I mean, I guess like if they in 250 years, if they were to stumble upon one of our military bases and around the world. I mean, we have military bases around the world, so maybe they wouldn't think it was as big a discovery. I don't know. It's just hard to like predict that, but it is kind of weird to think about things that are forgotten and why they're forgotten, and who stumbles across them, and then all of a sudden, like, well, you realize what this is, like, I mean, and then all of a sudden, oh wow, everybody's like, hey, look at this, and whereas what's the difference now? Somebody just decided to make it, but I mean, it still blows my mind. It's almost in plain sight, and yet it was completely forgotten. I guess there's a lot of things that you can say that about discoveries that are gonna be made. And in fact, there's another one that we have coming up here, right? The train.
There was one other thing I wanted to mention on this story.
Okay.
Somehow I let it slip right by me, but he's in my end notes. There was the reference to Jeffrey Amherst in there, that it was like part of his command that was there. And of course, he's like one of the ultimate, jerks of that section. With the whole chemical or germ warfare, given the blankets that were, infected with smallpox to the Native American tribes.
He was one of the few people that actually did that.
Yeah, and he, starved his men and stuff like that, because that was a big part of the British mentality, of their officership back then. And that's one of the things I point out in the American Revolution. George Washington, his soldiers were starving, but it's not because he was punishing them. And the British would, like take off the soldiers' boots and, beat their feet with whips, cut up their feet before they would march, like as punishment and stuff.
That's crazy. I guess that's why they were so disciplined, right? That's why they were so disciplined, was they were just scared out of their minds.
With like their officers, you could buy a commission in the army for your son to get prestige and stuff like that, whereas Washington promoted based on ability and stuff, unless you were Benedict Arnold. But he always wanted to promote Benedict Arnold, but Congress just didn't quite trust him for some reason.
Well, understandably.
Yeah.
Well, so that related for sure. You want to go on about the train discovery?
Yeah, it's
Nazi train.
Buried under my big pile of stuff about Japan, but
that was what we were supposed to talk about. We will get to Japan.
That keeps getting pushed back. But yeah, these two stories do tie together a lot better.
Yeah. No, we can go right. We're in the World War II era, so this will be perfect. This will be
great. You want to take this one, or?
Sure, I can. Yeah. So men claim to have found Nazi train loaded with treasure in Poland. That's the first article you sent, but as it turns out, it was confirmed.
It is confirmed.
Long lost Nazi loot is a loot train. It was found in Poland. It was basically treasure hunters. They approached officials in Wałbrzych, Poland, via their lawyer to claim that they had found an old Nazi loot train, and it's been confirmed by officials that it is, legitimate.
Yes.
They don't know what's exactly in it yet because, let's see.
It isn't quite safe to go in there.
Oh, it's not safe to go in there? Okay.
Basically because of like gases, that build up in there. Because this is like deep under the mountains.
Yeah, that's the other thing I was going to say is where they found it.
All these secret Nazi tunnels and stuff that they had railroad tracks in, and they're scared of booby traps. This is like Indiana Jones Part 4. This is what the fourth Indiana Jones movie should have been instead of that. Train wreck, pun intended.
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
That was that fourth movie. That was the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Oh my gosh!
Awful. It was so bad you forgot about it. Yes.
I never saw it. I refused to watch it.
Don't.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
I heard it was bad. Well, and yeah, I mean, this is that's exactly what I thought of when I first read the story. Was Indiana. This is the stuff that he would be all about if he was a real person.
Yeah, so I mean, we've got a train. They don't know what's on it, but what was really cool is all the area's folklore about this secret train that was just filled with gold and art and just weapons and stuff like that they were trying to get out of there when the Russians were advancing. So they were hiding these trains like in underground tunnels, and I guess the Nazi leaders or whoever planned to come back later when it all cleared out. But of course, the Nuremberg trials and the Nazi hunters, they went and hunted all these guys down, or they had to flee to South America. So we don't know. I mean, there could be more trains, but like this one was real because like some Polish miner, was told about it, and he's been looking for it like his entire adult life, and he never could find it. So I started getting excited, when like the Polish and German governments were like, yeah, we're taking this seriously. And then they went out and paid lawyers, which isn't cheap, to draft these letters and send them, and saying we want a 10% finder's fee. And it's like those National Treasure movies. You're like, 10% of what?
Exactly.
I forget, the ridiculous number of that they put, in the movie of how much that was worth, where they each got like, wasn't it like 100 million split 3 ways or something? But
you're talking about National Treasure?
Yeah.
I don't remember. But like, the other movie I keep thinking about is The Monuments Men. That's based on trying to recover.
Last week, like you've got to watch that movie.
You would love it.
He's reading the book, and we're talking a high school girl reading this book, and she was just enthralled by it.
Oh yeah,
I haven't even read the book. Train, 490 feet long. Precious metals, valuables, all that jewelry, all that loot that the Nazis stole. And the lawyer said this is like finding the wreck of the Titanic, like with that, assuming everything on the Titanic wouldn't be ruined, as it would, but except for the valuable jewels and stuff.
Okay.
But they said this is not a scam. We've got it, and it just like disappeared. This train just vanished. And cool name for the mountains. I mean, this is a movie, the Owl Mountains, a project called Reese, that Adolf Hitler had going on to get the stuff hidden. And apparently the Germans were like, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was a bit surprised that this didn't make more of the mainstream news. Oh,
it will if it's real and they go find it and pull it out, it'll be a huge story. They still
so that's what they're waiting for.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I understand.
But I mean, we're talking underground military bunkers and stuff in the mountains that the Nazis were building, and secret rail lines with camouflaged openings. I mean, this is a real treasure hunt.
Yeah.
They're saying, it could have armed explosives, booby traps, methane gas. I'm like, this is a movie.
Well, these guys are more brave than I am, even though it would be cool to do that. But think of all the booby traps that might be down there.
Because there's mountains near here, Altus, you know, and apparently like when this was Indian territory and like the, you know, train robbers and people, you know, horse thieves and cattle rustlers would come out here and hide. And there's supposed to be like a big loot hidden down there in those mountains. And, you know, it's like protected territory, like you get arrested if you go on it. And when I hear people talking about that, you know, without the Nazis, which people get really excited, anything Nazis, I mean, you say Nazis in a history classroom, the kids just like perk up and ooh. And, you know, that's just a mountain and it's just like buried somewhere. This is underground tunnels and Nazis and war loot and missing art, which of course I feel sorry for any, like if it's a painting or something, it's just toast. If
right.
It's down there this long, and it's a shame.
Yeah. I hope we are talking about this for quite a while. Like I hope there's lots of updates because I haven't seen anything new since that last article. Have you?
Yeah, just those two, and I mean they'll have to get all their ducks thrown. I mean, I suppose, you know, if it's Poland will have to be involved, Germany will have to be involved. If there's anything stolen from the Jewish people, I imagine I don't really see how Israel could make a claim to it, but, you know, Jewish organizations will have to, you know, they'll have to decide who gets what. And
yeah,
but I mean, like, what happens?
Well,
was this in Poland? This was in Poland, wasn't it?
Poland, yeah, yes.
I mean, if it's in their territory, who are them to say if they find out where the train is? I mean, I don't think the Polish government has a history of being jerks, but what's to stop them from saying, oh, it's ours?
Well, the Polish government has a history of being oppressed by more powerful governments, but they're kind of sandwiched there for a while, and that's the thing. Like the Red Army was coming in so fast that the Nazis, they just like, what are we gonna do with this stuff? I don't know. Figure it out. Hide it. Destroy it. What are we gonna? We got to go back. So
I mean, they could, you know, just say, oh well. Of course, I don't see them getting it out of there without, you know, German help and money and engineers, and I don't know how buried it is, or
so now you're talking trash on the Polish engineers?
No,
is that what
I can't name one, but I'm just saying I don't see the Polish government being jerks. I don't know of any account of it ever happening, but I was just saying, you know, they could. That thought would cross your mind. It's like, we don't have to pay these guys 10%. Let's just,
I think that they should have quite a bit of control. It's within their borders.
But I mean, it's really, you know, who was it stolen from, and we kind of know the answer to that. Yeah, everybody. So I guess we could transition to Hitler being elected.
Oh yeah, speaking of Hitler, speaking of the Nazis, so another presidential candidate, Bernie Sanders, he basically, I don't know even how the conversation came up, but basically he made the claim. A guy named Adolf in 1932, and this really stirred up some controversy. He said this way back in June, but it wasn't until later that people started to debate what he said. And
the Washington
I guess probably because
trying to find a story.
That's probably what it was, and then it was retweeted, and then kind of went viral a little bit. But they said why you shouldn't retweet Sanders' claim that Hitler won an election in 1932. You know, when I'm having conversation with people that don't know a lot about history, I'll kind of like, you know, kind of half joke about that too. Say, well, Hitler won an election, even though he, you know very well he, his party won a plurality. He didn't really win. It was they had the more votes. Their party had more votes than the other parties, and it was a very there were many factions at the time. It was a crazy time in the Weimar Republic, but really, when they let Hitler have power, they didn't know what was really going to happen. They thought that they could, they thought that they could control Hitler and make it. The conservatives thought that they could really make him do what they wanted, and as it turned out, Hitler got what he wanted and kind of controlled things. But then just very heated debate about what this means, and a lot of it's just kind of a technicality. But have you even seen any of the discussions on this on any?
No, I had and I'll come right out and say, I mean, I basically say, I'm in a roundabout way, what Bernie Sanders said, in my world history class. The Nazis won the election, and as a result, Hitler got to become the chancellor.
Yeah.
And I go through the whole thing where the president, von Hindenburg, thought he could control him, and you had to rule through coalitions. And a lot of European politics are like this still today, like places like Sweden, where there's so many parties. You have to form a coalition and kind of operate through that. But
yeah, the UK.
I mean, this is not a fair attack on Bernie Sanders. And I don't know is the Washington Post an outlet that's just like so pro-Hillary that they were trying to go find something to just discredit him or make him look stupid, or what? Are they just desperate for a story?
What could
this
be
is kind of a non-event.
Well,
thing.
but
the Nazi Party won the election. I mean, there's no doubt about it. In fact, they destroyed everybody.
This is about history being spun a certain way. That's why I thought this story was good to talk about, because you do have. There's a lot of technicalities. There's a lot of. It's a little bit more complex than what most people are used to talking about when they're talking about elections,
especially like the presidential election here.
Right. The United States, it's mostly Americans. Because I can't imagine Europeans kind of seeing what the big deal about this is. But really, I think a lot of people they don't quite understand how. They think of Hitler as this all-powerful dictator, and they don't understand that kind of what happened in those years before, those critical years.
He came to power legally, politically.
Yeah, it was completely legal. Now, he tried to take it over illegally one time. That didn't work out so well. Yeah, that's why he went to prison.
That's the thing that blows my mind. I mean, what he tried to do be the equivalent of you and a bunch of social studies teachers in Kansas tried to march on Topeka and basically take over the Capitol building.
Yeah.
I mean,
and then basically be treated like it wasn't that big of a deal. Like,
it
turned into a celebrity.
They shot and killed the police that tried to stop them. There was a big shootout. Several Nazi leaders were killed. And then I think they sentenced him to 5 years in prison, and he only served like 2.5.
If you ever look at
wrote a book and was treated like an honored guest and got special food in his own private room. He wasn't even really in a jail cell.
Right.
People watching him, but it's insane. It's like if you tried to do that, you'd never see the freedom again. That would be it. You probably wouldn't come out of it alive, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. That's he was basically did horrible things, and it was basically treated as a celebrity and glorified in many ways. Like, that's how he became famous. That's how he earned even more widespread attention, was because of that. And it's almost like today it's almost like Donald Trump saying the most nasty thing, but that actually helps him when people think originally it's going to hurt him. Yeah,
he's ran before and people took it as a joke. And this time he said, I got to come out and get attention, get people talking about it. I mean, attention is money. Attention is fame. Attention is glory. I mean, you try to be a nice guy and just go out there, no one's going to talk about you. That's boring. So he said radical things and got everyone talking about him, and all the people the nativists, ears perked up, and so they're going to agree. People are going to come out and attack him, and then you force people to defend him and what he said, and then they come do more interviews, and he gets more interviews, he gets more TV time. I mean, it's actually quite genius what he did. Then he gets a chance to explain it. His platform gets out there, it legitimizes it. All the news outlets are talking about him. Whereas if he hadn't done that, he just, it's a joke. It's just old Donald Trump.
Yeah, he has nothing to lose, really. I mean, and it's not like he has to worry about his campaign failing when he has plenty of money. But I don't want to talk about him too much.
He literally has so much money that the political machine, the Republican Party can't force him to say and do and toe the party line.
Right.
So it's almost like he doesn't care, and he doesn't. So that's why it's so appealing.
Well, he did recently, like, declare an oath to the Republican Party, saying he would back whoever the Republican nominee was. But I think he did that because he's like, well, it's going to be me. So anyway,
one powerful tool he had over them.
We need to keep our eye on him, because if he does get the nomination, it's a big if. I think he could end up being comparable to a couple of figures in history. One that comes to mind. Let me see if you say the same one here. Who comes to mind in history as a candidate that's like Donald Trump? Like,
as far as just not caring.
Well,
you're talking like a businessman, because I mean, you could go two different ways with this. I mean, Andrew Jackson absolutely did not give
Andrew Jackson.
Anyone
That's who I thought. Well, because it wasn't the same exact circumstances, but they both have this kind of outsider mentality, even though they're not really outsiders. Like, how could a billionaire be really an outsider? And Andrew Jackson wasn't an outsider because, I mean, he was in Congress. It's not like he.
General. I mean, he followed the common. He and Grant and.
That's the thing. They're both of them have in common that they're kind of just riding this wave of. I don't want to call it populism, but I maybe
grassroots, or
it's definitely, it's like a grassroots kind of just what's the right word here? I'm trying to think of, like, kind of retaliation movement, like a grassroots retaliation,
reactionary to what's going on.
Yeah, that's probably a better word. But we'll keep an eye on that.
It's intriguing because he's not a politician. I mean, have we ever really had a business man running the country? I don't even know what that would be like. And if he wins a nomination, it'll be the most fascinating presidential election in quite a while. I mean, I think it would even surpass the whole, here we have an African-American candidate who actually stands a chance. That was the big narrative of that one. Because, I mean, if it's just some random, I mean, those other Republicans, they all sounded the same. I mean, you have one argument between, a governor and a senator, and they sat there and went back and forth, between Paul and Christie. And, that was the exciting. Other than that, it was the Donald Trump show.
Yeah.
Like, the media attacks him. He doesn't care. Just fires right back at him. And
there's a lot of people that don't agree with him, but they just like his. They like his style. They like how he's blunt and. Yeah. But anyway,
and I mean, that's kind of to go back and tie it into what we're supposed to be talking about. The Nazis. It was all Jewish all the time. Whereas Donald Trump, it's all immigration all the time. You have to demonize somebody, blame every problem we have on somebody else, and it gets people divided. You get them emotional, angry, and they'll be angry on both sides. That's all everyone's talking about. I mean, it's like how he's pushing the narrative. And I'm not comparing him to, because I've actually had a student this week who's like, I was like, he's not a Nazi. He's, and he actually thought, we're going to round people up and put them in camps and all this stuff. I'm like, where are you getting this from? But it's this connection, there are similarities. And as far as whipping up, support and getting people angry, and if it's just another boring election, it's just another boring election, and we get 40% voter turnout again, or 36.
That's the thing. It's about emotions, getting people, like Bernie Sanders on the left. He's definitely getting people fired up, and so those are the candidates that I think are going to be the most successful in 2016.
Yeah, but how weird was this? Let's see if I can find it. Here it was. Bernie Sanders was asked about religion. How does it inform his politics? And he answered with that. Cautionary tale of Nazi Germany and Adolf Hitler's rise to power. A guy named Adolf Hitler won an election in 1932, Sanders said. Christian Science Monitor was interviewing. Those guys just are everywhere. He won an election, and 50 million people died as a result of the election in World War II, including 6 million Jews. So what I learned as a little kid is that politics is, in fact, very important. Like, why is that your answer to someone asking you about your religion playing a role in
I had no idea that was the question that led to that answer, him saying that. That's very bizarre.
There's a bunch of stuff left out of this, or was really off base with their answer, or I don't know. So the whole thing started out very, very weird. And you know, talks about the Nazis winning 230 seats, how they got support from Catholics, Protestants, the rich and the poor, the young and the old. It was very appealing. What the Nazis were saying, basically, because of what I said earlier, it's just that you're taking everyone's problems, you're just scapegoating it on a particular group.
And things were desperate. They were desperate people in the Weimar Republic. Things were not going well. They were starting to get a little bit better in like a couple years of that, but most of the 20s were a crazy time. They're going to radicalize, and they're going to scapegoat, like you said. We can't even compare this time to how it was in 1920s Germany.
It was bad. I mean, that whole Treaty of Versailles and the reparations and everything else, just I mean, they just brought it on themselves, unknowing. I mean, Wilson tried to warn them, but
yeah, Wilson was right on that. And we can't put ourselves in other people's shoes, other countries' shoes. We just can't do it. Most people can't do it. And there's another example of how, well, I just don't see how they could let the Nazis get to power. Like, that just shows me, like, you're not really thinking from their perspective, are you? You're not really learning what the average German was going through when they had to have wheelbarrows of money to pay for a loaf of bread.
Yeah, I mean, I tell the story. I don't know if it's true, but you mentioned the wheelbarrows. You know, I talk about the story. She just had to go buy some flour, and to get enough German marks to buy it, she had to put just this pile of money in the wheelbarrow. Like, took it down there and just left the wheelbarrow and the money outside because it was so worthless that no one was going to steal the money. And when she came back out to get the money, someone had dumped the money out and stolen the wheelbarrow.
I haven't heard that one.
That's like, I don't know the story's true, but always I'm like, it was that bad.
It might as well be true.
Americans and Englishmen were taking billion-dollar German marks and just gluing them to the sides of their briefcases and walking around because they thought it was funny.
Yeah, I did hear that one. Well, we've been putting it off too long. I think we should mention the enemy in World War II to the Americans, Japan. We've been putting Japan off for way too long. Can we move on to Japan finally after?
Yeah, these are the last two stories I've got. Are these two stories about Japan?
Oh, that's it. Well then, great. We're actually doing pretty well on time.
Yeah, we actually are. And I mean, I think we've gotten more energy into this one. And I'm wide awake now. I was tired. 8:30, 9 o'clock. This got me all fired up.
That's right. Adrenaline. Well, I got caffeine, so. But yeah, I'll start off. I think I found the first one, but didn't you find a different one that was related or something like that? I was going to. You want me to mention the revisionism in Japan, and then you can follow up with how China and Korea just won't let it go? Because I think that's more of your angle.
Together, and it was the order they were put in there was the order we need to go in. So it was the Japan revisionist deny World War II sex slave atrocities, the first one.
Right. I'll go ahead. This story is from the BBC, and we found this. This is August 3rd, so we're finally getting to it. But basically, 70 years after the end of World War II, I'm reading from this now, by the way, the voices of revisionism in Japan are growing stronger and moving into the mainstream, particularly on the issue of comfort women. comfort women were the ones who were forced to be, and kids at home, they need to make sure that they have earmuffs on. Women were forced to be sex slaves for Japanese soldiers during the war. That is well documented. I don't know how widespread it was, but you know, if you teach history, you know that this really did happen. But it gives an example here of like they mentioned this guy named Toshio Tamogami, who's well educated, knowledgeable, and a nice guy, and they're interviewing him
polite is the way
yeah. But anyway, he has the viewpoint that goes against that. And so last year, Mr. Tamogami Rando, he came fourth. Most strikingly, it was the among young voters aged 20 to 30, he got nearly a quarter of the votes cast. And this true history that he talks of, I'm not going to read his quote, but Japan was not the aggressor, but the liberator. Japanese soldiers fought valiantly to expel the hated white imperialists who had subjugated Asian peoples for 200 years. Now, there's a little bit of truth in that for sure, especially more so in China, but it is a proud history where Japan, alone in Asia, was capable of taking on and oppressors. It is also a version of history that has no room for the Japanese committing atrocities against fellow Asians. I won't go on any further, but basically you get the idea that, oh, wait, though, they did ask him about the massacre of civilians in Nanjing. And then his response to that was, I can declare that there was no Nanjing, he says, claiming there were no eyewitnesses of Japanese soldiers slaughtering Chinese civilians. So I don't know where why he says that there's no eyewitnesses. I
mean, I've got quite a lot to say on that one.
Okay, then go ahead and say that, because that really kind of, when I first read that, what?
Well, there's a very strong narrative that I picked up on this first time I read it, when I went through it again today. It talks out, you said the young Japanese, 25%. And he came in fourth and got 600,000 votes in Tokyo. That's an impressive number of votes for fourth place. But he comes out and says, we got to take back our history. This is, history, because it gets into this later in these articles, where he says, oh, we're learning the victor's version of history and all of this stuff. So when he said, take back our history, think back to those conversations we had about the Confederate flags and the Confederate monuments, and, that narrative of, oh, we lost the war, therefore that we're vilified, and, you win the war, you're heroes, and all of this stuff. And when he says, take back our true history, that's interesting. And the phrase version of history is like, in the version of history we need to be teaching in Japan, there's no room for any Japanese atrocities. Yeah, the invasion of Manchuria was awful. And, he's talking about they call it the rape of Nanking, is what he's talking about there. And when he says no eyewitnesses, I'm going to tell a story here. When I was in college, I loved to go to Barnes & Noble, and I got to where I'd go to Barnes & Noble, and I went in there every single time. The first place I went to was the history section. Then when I started teaching, I would go in there and I literally bought all these books, and I would write my own lessons. And I'd go to the Civil War stuff and World War II, because those are the most fascinating to me. I picked up a book. It was a white book, and it had the Japanese rising sun on it. That imperial banner, that naval jack with the beams of light coming off of it. It had these Japanese soldiers with bayonets on the cover, and there were just these people laying around that had been slaughtered. And it was called The Rape of Nanking. And I picked it up, and in the middle of that book, there was probably, I don't even really know, this is a long time ago, but I'd say there were probably at least 30 to 50 pages of photographs. And the Japanese soldiers themselves documented this event all I can say, like you mentioned, the Safe for Children thing. I'll try and be as. There's really no good way to say this though.
Yeah,
There really isn't at all. So it's just, yeah, earmuffs on the children. They
definitely.
took pictures of them raping children and stuff. I mean, I opened that book and I flipped through. So I saw about 3 pictures. And it
Jeez.
still to this day, I cannot forget what I saw. And I literally slammed that book shut, put it back on the shelf, and walked away.
That's horrifying.
I mean, the stuff they were doing to children. And it, it was in there. There wasn't a wrapper on it, because it's historical, documented stuff. But yeah, it's I can't get it out of my head still. So to say there's no evidence for it is crazy. I mean, I just looked at like 4 or 5, and it was so bad, and stories, where they were just like throwing babies up and catching them on their bayonets, like throwing them up and like spearing them when they were falling down. I mean, they took picture and video of this. It's not like, yeah, but heck, there's people who deny the Holocaust happened.
Yeah.
And like I said,
there's
father,
video evidence of that.
Yeah, I was over there. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but my father was 57 when I was born. He married, second wife was a much younger woman, and he was over there in World War II, and he would never talk about the stuff he saw. Just wouldn't do it. I mean, it disturbed our soldiers. We're talking soldiers who, they would talk about battles. They would talk about the fighting. They would even talk about their friends. They see their friends getting shot and killed, like on the beaches at Normandy and stuff. But you ask the guys who saw the death camps, the concentrate, they couldn't hardly talk about it. It was just so atrocious. Because, I mean, you expect the deaths in war, fighting the soldiers. I mean, they're trained for that. But they go in and they see the death camps. It's like you can't describe what you're seeing because these are innocent civilians, and the smell, and just when you realize what they were doing, they couldn't talk about it.
Yeah, I imagine it'd be twice as traumatic than combat, even, to witness the atrocities on civilians that they saw, not only on the death camps, but the cities that where they. But yeah, you have a different perspective too, though, on I guess I know, and this is related to what we talked about, I think, a couple episodes ago, where we were looking at American exceptionalism, and when we remember our own history, we should only look at the best things, so much the bad things that we did. We both agreed that you should definitely focus quite a bit on the bad things so you don't repeat them. Definitely, I think Japan's wrong here to just completely spin this thing and completely change history. But then you have China, on the other hand, and South Korea and North Korea, which I don't know, they're in there somewhere, but they're all they just keep on the like, Japan, you owe us an apology, man. Like,
right before I came on here, I mean, I was watching a video. I had to pause it to leave to come in here and start this, but there's something very interesting that happened in China this month that falls right in line with this and kind of what they're doing. So I was going to ask if you had seen it or not, but
I think I read a story. Go ahead, because I will butcher what I know. Yeah, I just kind of glanced at it.
We're running the risk of doing a big jump over a lot of info here, if we start that discussion already. But I mean, because this is kind of like the lost cause thing, like with the Civil War, that narrative of romanticizing everything about the Confederacy, and the slave plantation article we did, where we're just like, push that to the side, we're not going to talk about it type stuff. Let's go look at the beautiful plantation house, and the palmetto trees and the Spanish moss and all of this stuff. With this guy, he's like, okay, if this happened, because like what they deny more than anything else is the kidnapping of Korean and Chinese girls and sending them basically as sex slaves to Japanese soldiers. And he makes this comment,
Right.
how many soldiers had to be mobilized to forcibly drag these women away? Well, how many Nazi SS did it take to drag away 6 million Jews? Not that many. I mean, they've got guns and you don't.
Right.
I mean, this is ridiculous. He's like, where are all the Korean men? Were they all cowards? I'm like, no, they were all dead. I mean, like I said, I didn't look at all the pictures, but I saw the piles of them. They were just bayoneting them to death, where they literally had a pit and they were just bayoneting them and they're falling down in there. I mean, you know, these men had guns, and they used the phrase Japan's nationalists, like, you know, they're the ones that want to deny this. You know, and Japan's trying to build up their military because of China. And China's basically trying to run this guilt trip on Japan, like, oh, 70 years ago, you did stuff that was so bad. It's like, China, Cultural Revolution, your own people, Mao Zedong. I mean, more recent than this. But yeah, and oh, there's no evidence these women were coerced. And then they go to this place where there's only 10 of these women who are still alive. They're basically in a care place where people are taking care of them because, you know, they're old, but they're also traumatized, you know, because of what happened. And the Japanese military is trying to say, oh, no, these girls were prostitutes. They came forcibly. And this woman literally gives the account of the day she was kidnapped. And she literally gives the account of when she tried to run away and the Japanese soldiers dragged her back and said, why were you trying to run away? And she told them the truth. They started beating the crap out of her, knocking teeth out of her head for talking too much. I mean, people don't make stories like that up. I mean, you know, there's real, and she, you know, old, over 80 years old, you know, giving this account, and the Japanese nationalists, I guess that's what they decided to call them, are like, oh, you know, Asia has a long history of selling poor girls into prostitution. You know, their parents, which, yeah, I mean, I know that's true, but you know, she's 88 years old. Tells the story how she got kidnapped. And yeah, it's just kind of disgusting. And at the end, it literally says, you know, oh yeah, she lost some of her hearing too from the beating. But you know, this Mr. Tamagomi says, you know, they've been coached to embellish their stories. You know, this is just something the South Korean government's doing to try and ruin us.
Well,
go ahead.
Come on. I mean, just embellishment. How can you even bring embellishment up when this is like, have you no empathy at all for what happened to this lady? Like, there's no, it's like, just straight up say that she's lying or not. Embellishment, that has nothing to do with anything. Everybody embellishes stories. That's nothing, that's irrelevant. She's not lying. These people are not lying. And
yeah, particularly, I mean, when there's 10 of them sitting there in basically an old folks care home, and then it finished with this Masayoshi Matsumoto, 93 years old, who actually witnessed this. He was with the Japanese army as a medical orderly, and he said he blocked it out for a long time and was going to die. You know, the people who witnessed it but didn't, I'm assuming, partake in, you know, the rapes and stuff like that, kind of block it out. But then when you get to be really old and you're 93 and you see this new movement to pretend it didn't happen, you know, he came out and he started talking.
We're criminal.
Yeah, he started talking about it, and he's like, the Korean girls, you know, were thought to be the prettiest girls. They were mainly for the Japanese officers. So the poor soldiers, I mean, this is really disturbing. The soldiers, to get the women, had to go and attack local villages. You know, they went in screaming, are there any good girls here? And they robbed and beat and raped and killed. And Matsumoto said later in his life, you know, after the war was over, felt so bad about the stuff that he, and it did say here to try and atone for his sins. Like I said, I don't know if he was involved in this or just guilt by association or what. He goes off and becomes a priest, and he's saying, Mr. Abe speaks of this, something he witnessed, talking about other people denying it and stuff. Like, they weren't alive then, I was. I saw it. I saw these things. And he does the whole, one who fails to look back and perceive the past is bound to repeat those wrongdoings.
Yeah.
You can't pretend this didn't happen.
I don't even think we should really, I think it's kind of silly even just because there's overwhelming evidence that these things happen. I think the bigger thing to really think about is, and I think about this as well, because I have a song that I made called "I Think All My Ancestors Were Wrong." I need to send them. I heard that one. My band Electric Noodle Room, check it out. But that kind of is related to these younger people saying, you know what, we don't want to have anything to do with those dead people. They have nothing to do with us. And I think a lot of them, they would admit openly that, yeah, these things happen, but what does that have to do with me? And this is something that they don't want to even have to bring up. It's kind of like back to what you said earlier, the slavery thing in the United States. Like, what are these people alive today? This has nothing to do with me. This is maybe my ancestors a long time ago. I mean, there's that celebrity Ben Affleck. I think one of his ancestors was a slave owner, is what they found out. Is that right? So I mean, it's like there is a point where we do need to kind of stop with the blame game here, but at the same time, we need to learn about the truth. And I think that's what you put it here on the with the shared document we had, that that China and North Korea criticizes Japan for something that happened over 50 years ago is laughable. And Japan never did officially give an apology, though. They never officially gave an
this
apology.
Other article kind of gets into some of that, but the other thing with the younger people, though, I wrote here in the notes, this article brings up a good point. How long should people have to apologize and continue apologizing for things they themselves did not do?
Right.
Like white Americans today get this white guilt thing, and it's like they feel really bad, particularly, the progressive-minded white Americans feel really bad about stuff that happened 150, 200 years ago. And it's like, but you had nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
And it is used for political gain and power and argue, to shout down the other side. I mean, I just really imagine young people in Japan today would feel like, why should we have to pay for this? Why should we have to apologize for it when we didn't do it? Especially when it's a country like North Korea demanding you apologize for something. When you look at North Korea today, and China with the Cultural Revolution. I mean, Stalin has always kind of disturbed me more than Hitler, because we know he likely killed more people, and Stalin was like killing his own people. And
Stalin killed everybody.
Yeah, in war you can kind of, I mean, not to defend Hitler one iota, but you can at least see in his mind, he was like, oh, well, they're the enemy, and you can rationalize that. But Stalin was like killing his own people in his own party, which Hitler did too, for power. But
Stalin also was sneakier about it. Like, it was more. He just made people disappear. Like, you don't know what happened to a lot of them. It's just like.
So like
he erased their pictures.
Killing millions and millions of his own people. And it's like, then China looks down their nose. But I guess the second one, do you have the title and where that's from? That second article, it didn't get copied into my notes.
I don't see it here either.
Is it? Oh,
is it the Yahoo one? Yeah, let me click on this here. Oh, yeah, I got it. So it's Japan marks it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Japan marked the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II Saturday under criticism from China and South Korea, which said nationalist Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, is it? I don't know.
Abe, maybe?
Abe failed to properly apologize for Tokyo's past aggression. What I already said, basically, they're not officially apologizing. And then the South Korea President Park Geun-hye his remark left much to be desired and stressed the need for Japan to resolve the long simmering issue of Asian women forced to work as sex slaves in Japanese military brothels.
Here's yet another reference to that.
Yeah. And then we, a lot of this information is kind of what we already mentioned in this article.
Yeah, but they transition together, and then it goes into that news story I was watching a while ago. But it was, calling Tokyo militarist past, and it's like, well, if this is China saying this, that's kind of ironic, considering what they're spending on their military. But what they're really overlooking here, and I'm sure it's for purely political reasons, is, Japan is basically based on the Shinto faith, and it's based on ancestor worship and pride in your family's history and heritage and lineage, and if you do anything disgraceful to disgrace your family, you basically get etched out of the family history, the record books. It's like once a year, their families get back together, and they prepare a meal, and they set up places for their dead ancestors, and they go out to the cemetery and burn candles and incense, and they invite these spirits of their ancestors to basically come down and join them. And they'll read the list off of all their honored and revered ancestors. And it's like, if you do anything bad, you get kicked off the list. We're talking about the samurai tradition and stuff here that runs deep in this country. And there's a very deep reverence for their ancestors. And that's one of the reasons why the crime rate is so just like non-existent in Japan. They don't want to do anything to shame their families. And their war, this is a war memorial. It's not just a World War II memorial. It's all of them. And this is a big deal in Japan that they go out there and they do every year. And the problem China and Korea and these others seem to have with it is, oh, well, there's some World War II war criminals on there. Their names have been etched on there. And they just seem obsessed with getting this apology. And it is weird, Japan's reaction and Germany's reaction to World War II. Germany couldn't apologize enough. And some people are saying that's why Germany's so open now to the 800,000 migrants that they're going to accept, is they don't want to be called Nazis. They don't want to be compared to us. They feel like obligated. Yeah, but you got China saying strong dissatisfaction. But it goes back to this thing. I mean, they're saying at the speech that he gave at this memorial, I don't want future generations of Japanese to have to continuously apologize for this. It's like, when does it get old? I mean, when is mainland Europe going to go up to Sweden and go, you have to apologize for the Vikings, because you've never done that.
Yeah.
They even call it this apology tour, and
I'm sorry about Genghis Khan, all right?
Yeah, I can understand young Japanese just saying, we don't want this holding over our head. But the last line of the last article was very disturbing. It said, because all these people who witnessed it are dying, and they're dying at the same time that this opposition and denial is getting even stronger. So you've got these two things going on at the same time. So Japan saying, or China saying, that's a non-apology. Pyongyang, good old North Korea, derided this apology as unpardonable mockery of the Korean people. And South Korea is really understandably angry over this whole sex slave thing. But it seems to fall along political lines, and this is where that video that I just watched before we started came in. The Philippines, who were also victims of the Japanese, they said they applauded it and said, oh, we've got a very strong friendship with Japan. And the United States has been like, oh, yeah, Japan, well, that's great. We got a strong friendship with them. Australia said this was a great apology. This should make it easier for other countries to accept Japan's commitment to a better future overall. Even the Japanese emperor, who's the son of the emperor Japan during World War II, said he felt a profound remorse for what had happened. And what is actually going on is China is doing this big military buildup, flexing its muscles. Russia's buddying up to China again. The United States and, of course, the European Union's facing off against China, in this economic war. We're facing off against Russia in this proxy war in Eastern Europe. You've basically got Russia's good buddies with Iran and backing up everything. And it's actually more of a political, economic thing than it is. They're really concerned about World War II and who's apologizing for what.
I agree.
And China this month had their first ever Spike the Football, Yes, We Beat Japan parade, in which they got out all this military equipment and drones, these big giant drones, and started parading them out and gave these speeches about how great they were for defeating Japan. And South Korea's leaders showed up. European Union leaders didn't. The United States didn't. Australia didn't. A bunch of these countries didn't show up, and the countries that did show up and the countries that didn't are very telling.
Huh. Yeah, I need to watch that. I think that it has been overblown there. That little, like you said, it's definitely political. Going back to the revisionists of Japan, I think that's the bigger issue here that we need to be concerned about, is that a fairly large sect of the, or faction of the population, wants to deny that these atrocities happen. That's the more disturbing thing to me. And the thing that we need to worry about, as far as these people, a lot of these younger people, they're going to get into government, they're going to be in charge. And I think if you have a warped view of your own country's history, a lot of times that can translate to rabid nationalism that can lead to more tension with your neighbors.
It's a lot like that American exceptionalism thing. I mean, whenever I see Sean Hannity, I guess, name drop, debating someone, it's really weird because it seems like you're either on one side of the spectrum or the other. America's awful, America's evil, the genocide of the Indians, the slavery, and dropping the atomic bombs, and we're just awful. Or it's just the flag waving, we're the greatest country ever, we can do no wrong. There's the truth somewhere in the middle.
Right. If you criticize the American military, say anything like, "Oh, so you hate the troops? So you hate America?"
Yeah.
That's what it turns into.
There's a very, very, very interesting video out there that definitely no one wants their kids around when they watch it. In fact, I might even tell you about the link privately, because I don't even want it associated with our show at all. But it brings up that, obligated to support the troops, and he goes on this big long rant about why he doesn't support the troops at all. It's very interesting, but I will not mention it here because I don't want it associated with us in any way, shape, or form because of some of his other content. But
yeah. Well,
yeah, it's the search for the truth. But what I really don't get, yes, the stuff the Japanese military did in World War II was awful. And I am amazed that, people with the Japanese demeanor and stuff today, that they could have ever been led to that. But it's the same thing with the Germans during World War II, the stuff you can be brainwashed and led and, ordered to do, and they would follow through with. But Japan's track record since then, you look at the recovery, and it's what problem has Japan been? And I've noticed there's a big, even Vice News is going after Japan and just trying to make Japan look awful and evil and all these different stories. I'm this is a very peaceful country, very passive country. Yeah. They're not imperialists. They don't even have really an imperialist past outside of that Korea, China era in the early 20th century, whenever they were oh, we got to do what the world powers are doing. So I realized they were in Korea long before that, but they weren't anything on the scale of what the European powers were doing. And it's the people criticizing them, it's like North Korea definitely doesn't have a leg to stand on. And so much of this Japanese nationalism is a response to China and their actions in that part of the world.
Yeah, you're right. It's so this kind of goes against what I was saying earlier, but Japanese culture, and I have a friend who is married to somebody who was from Japan, and he's been over there at least 2 or 3 times, and I think he's always blown away when he goes over there at how just peaceful and kind of there is, I know this is kind of a cliche in a way to say, but just there's less crime, there's less aggression,
I mean,
there's
the crime
less.
is almost non-existent. I mean, like,
Yeah,
petty
you mentioned the
pickpockets
ancestors
and
thing,
stuff. Yeah, it's very,
but
it's a homogenous society, so you don't
yeah,
have any cultural, racial issues at all.
just like Poland, even
Well,
though,
I mean, like I say, those European countries used to be very, very, very homogenous, but now
yeah, changing.
they're going through their immigration phase like the United States of America did, and
Well, we should talk about that probably next time, about the developments with the refugees pouring into those European countries, because that's definitely a historical thing I think we need to delve into.
yeah, I mean, I really don't know. I mean, like, there has to be a line somewhere, or it's just not going to be Europe anymore. I mean, they're already changing it, and there's so many things, it's just issues that people aren't even wanting to bring up, that I don't know if it's denial or what, or if they're just like so overly grateful and generous. But I mean, simple math has to be done at some point. Or it's
Looking at
just,
resources, it's
yeah,
a resource
just,
issue, is what it
and
is.
and just your culture and identity at some point has to be taken into consideration,
Yeah,
because
but I'm not as worried about that. I mean,
millions and millions of people, and it's like, well, if they don't stop it now, I mean, next year, how many more, how many more, how many more? It's like, the Western world can't just open the door and say everyone that wants to come in, because we're going to have 6 billion people.
yeah, but I don't know. We could have a great deep discussion. I probably disagree with you on some of this stuff, because I think borders are becoming more and more silly. The more that we go,
Yeah, but
you think about like how global we all are, and how
I mean, that's the
I
ultimate
think
end
there
game. There's no doubt about it.
will be no borders. Yeah, I think that eventually, someday, if the track keeps going on, that there will be you'll be able to go around the world without having to have a
Except North Korea.
passport or a visa. Oh, except for North Korea, there'll always be one.
But yeah, I mean, and at that point, I mean, what is culture at that point? I mean, I love geography and cultures and ethnicities and studying, the religions and stuff. And it's just, I guess in my mind, I'm like, this is Germany, and I've got this mental image of what Germany is, and I'm like, this is, I mean, ISIS down there, blowing up these old temples and stuff, and I'm like, if I was going to go to Syria, that stuff they're blowing up is what I would want to go see. And you can understand the people running and fleeing, but it's like there's, the religion's going to be an issue, the culture is going to be an issue, the language, all of these, just people have different. Germany's Germany, and Syria is Syria, and Iraq is Iraq, and it's like you can't really take one type of flower and plant it in another flower bed and say, oh, well, that's a rose now, But if there's no borders, it's like, can you go to Germany anymore?
But you're
is that making sense? I mean, it's like you expect certain cultural things, and
but there'll be a new culture. There's going to be a new culture. It's going to be okay. I mean, look at the United States. This is the greatest example of assimilation and new cultures forming. I mean, we have
Oh yeah,
Look at
but
how
it's like,
short our history, our culture is so unique in such a short amount of time. I mean, there'll just be something different. I mean, it's not.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah, you're gonna have to make adjustments teaching geography, but I think
but
there's nothing to worry about.
the thing is, the American culture, you know what happened to the American culture? The American culture was the Plains Indians, and it's gone. I mean, that's the section I'm doing right now. And I'm like, that's the big tragedy of it. That was a way of life, and they were just completely overwhelmed. And
That's
some
a
of
big
their descendants still exist, but it's like you have to give up one culture when another one comes in and overpowers it.
look at all the
And
Native American tribes. I mean, look at all the cultures lost, and like that's the greatest
yeah, I mean,
tragedy,
that's
I
the
think.
price. And I'm like, a little country like Sweden of 8 million people, it's just, they've already got a million, non-Swedes living there. On the Swedish population, they have like less than 2 children per couple, and the immigrant couples or migrant or whatever you call them have 6 to 8. Do the math in 40 years, and it's like people leave certain countries to go to other countries, but like, at what point does the country you're going to become the country you left? There has
Well,
to be
look at
assimilation. In America, there was no unique American culture, but we went through phases where, this group of immigrants came in, and then it went to, the Irish, and then it went to the Italians and Germans, and then we went to Latin America, and there's assimilation times and patterns. We're such a big country, and we got our culture kind of from, oh, pizza, spaghetti. We got Halloween from the Irish, we got Mexican food, from Latin America. German food is huge here. We just don't realize that's what we're eating. But it's just, I don't know, because I think at some point you have to say there has to be a line somewhere. But then again, you feel bad for the people fleeing, but it's like the people fleeing, I mean, you don't even really know who they are or where they're coming from or what their intentions are. I know most of them are running from ISIS, but at what point, that guy the other day in France, just got up, pulled out a gun, and if there hadn't been 3 American soldiers there to stop him, he'd have killed everybody on the train.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like he was, he's a migrant. So there's definite things that's going to have to be dealt with when it comes to that, as far as how many, when, where, who are they really? Because, I mean, they'll show up and they'll be 23, 24, and they'll say, oh, I'm 15 and I'm from Syria, so they can go to school. It's like, I don't want some 23-year-old guy going to school with my daughter. But they all give the same date, every single one of them, and they all say they're from Syria. And it's like some of them clearly are not from Syria. They're wrong ethnicity, wrong race, everything. But that's, if you get Syria, you get in. That's just people from everywhere. And, it's just there has to be some control to it.
We are at about an hour and a half, so
yeah, and this whole last part of it was completely unscripted, unplanned, but
I don't want to edit any more than that. It takes me too long to edit.
Yeah, we went through our big immigration phase, and we came out.
I think we should pick up on this though next time, because I want to read, because I've seen some of the headlines and kind of superficially, but I want to really dig deeper on this before we talk more about it. So maybe
well, I could literally sit here all night long talking about it. I probably read 6, 7, 8 stories a day on it, all the comments underneath, and they can't take every single one of them. I mean, it would just, A, they can't afford it, and B, there's not enough space. I mean, the immigrants started coming here in the 1800s because Europe's population doubled in the 19th century. And, so they started coming here. And it's like some of those countries are tiny. It's like Germany is smaller than Montana. Germany's got 81 million people.
Yeah, it's crowded.
it's smaller. It's like they're taking in 800,000. I mean, and they can't speak German. They're not. Most of them can't even read. It's like, what are they going to do? And you're bound to have the friction and stuff, you know. So, not to mention a lot of these people, you know, very different from the Western mentality and how they treat women and stuff like that. Women's rights, stuff that took thousands of years for Western civilization to develop and culture and build. And it's like you can't just pick the tulips and put them in with the daisies. Oh, that's a tulip, or you know, that's right. The ISIS guy, any is radical. I mean, basically call what it's just a weed. You can't take a weed and plant it in a rose garden. Oh, that's a rose. You know, that's a jihadist. It's like you have to know who these people are.
I think they need to be treated as refugees, and they need to be contained, and they need to be supervised, and they need to be supervised by the international community, not just one country. It's everybody's responsibility to help these people. So the bottom line is that they need help. They need to play as they die. So we need to restrict their freedoms, but we need to take care of them. So.
Yeah, somebody.
But other countries are going to have to step up. More refugees. That's the bottom line. That's what I see right now. I mean,
that's why big thumbs. I mean, Jordan. I don't know if you've seen the numbers on Jordan.
No.
There's only like 3 Jordanese for every refugee that they have in their country. They're like the only country in that part of the world actually taking them in.
They were the ones taking all the Palestinians.
Yeah, where's Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar?
Don't get me started on Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. In a weird way, Saudi Arabia, maybe not directly, but in a weird way, they're funding the people who are causing it. The Wahhabis.
Yep.
Get me started on radical jihadists. I may not stop.
I think I'm gonna stop the broadcast so we can maybe we can keep talking about this.
Oh yeah, I'm all for it. The whole last part, I don't even know if it's part of the podcast or what, but yeah.
No, I'll keep it part of the video.
Sign us off, and then you can splice it on to wherever you want it to be.
Well, okay. I'll probably keep most of it.
Seriously, we were talking about what, Japan? And somehow it turned into this.
But no, that's the beauty of it. You want it to be like this. Do you want it to naturally evolve? So, but,
yeah, I would kind of like a little more freedom, honestly, as far as what we were talking about. But
yeah, we just got to learn how to be a little bit more brief with how we say things. But that's how we are as history teachers.
I've never met another person like me that just does that. I don't know. You can like give me a topic and I can talk about, if I know a fair amount about it, I could go on forever.
Yeah. That's the history teacher in you, or the history. Yeah. Okay. So this has been episode 5. We will be talking again on the next episode of the podcast, probably in a couple of weeks, I assume. But if you want to contact us, it's contextpodcast@gmail.com. Contextpodcast@gmail.com. Also, be sure to check out our YouTube channels, Mr. Beats Social Studies channel, and Reading Through History, and anything else. Our websites. I have actually like 7 YouTube channels, but yeah. Anyway. And I'm going to play the William McKinley song to play us.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. Signing off.
All right. I'm hitting stop.